Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some chicken pot pies. We're going to make lemon tarts and some almond pastry, all using my pie crust, which I've had chilling in there. It's a butter pie crust, and we'll talk about that when we get to it in a little bit. But that's kind of our theme when I go through it, because whenever I make pie crust, I make a lot, so I only have to make it once because it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work because I make a lot of it. So let's start by getting the base for our chicken pot pie going. We're going to just keep it really simple. Onions, carrots, celery, mushrooms, shredded chicken, and then we'll make like a roux-based gravy using kind of a chicken bouillon and some spices. That's what will fill the insides of our pot pies. So chicken pot pie is really great if you have you could do turkey pot pie with leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. Also, if you ever just have leftover shredded chicken or you buy that shredded chicken from Costco, it just is wonderful to use in that because it takes away a lot of the work that's needed in there. So we're going to start by dicing up our onions. We're going to get that sauteing in our pan in here, and then we'll get our carrots and onions prepped up there because we'll do a little saute on them and nice and warm them up, add in our chicken. Then we'll take everything out and make a roux and a gravy, mix everything together and fill it up. But you got to saute them up because you don't want to just throw raw vegetables and everything in there in a gravy. It won't be as nice. So we're going to start with a little bit of olive oil in here, our pan. And I've got my temperature because I am using my all-clad pan, which is all metal. I'm going to keep it around a 6 to start off with, and then we'll turn it down. But when you use an all-metal pan, you don't want to go super high on there, especially if you're going for a caramelization because you're more likely to burn it. So let me wash my onions off my hand for a second here.
Question: do you do Elf on the Shelf?
We do Elf on the Shelf in our house, and it is one of those things that I remember when we first got it. So excited, was so into all the fun things with it, and then I realized how much work it is. But you got to make the magic coming and keep having younger kids, and magic keeps on lasting. But yes, it is definitely a big thing here. Now, we do a crazy thing every now and then with it, but I'm not the one that dedicates, an hour of my day to that. It's a lot of work. I did that one year and whew, never again. But we do have it. Ours often gets sick and is stuck in the same spot for a day or two, It's a very sickly elves. We don't just have one. We have 5 elves. Every one of our kids has an elf. And then we have a little baby one for Jack. We'll have to take a little picture, maybe post some of their shenanigans they do. They're very good elves, very mild, not too crazy on there. Okay, we got our onions cooking up here. And let's get on for our lemon tarts. So earlier today, I made a bunch of butter pie crust, which we're going to be using for almond pastry, lemon tarts, and our chicken pot pies. So I'm going just to take one of my discs here. And we keep them, you chill them up in the fridge for a couple hours, so they need to be kind of cold. But we're going to start filling up our little muffin tins to make our lemon tarts. Because this is my husband's birthday dessert. He absolutely loves them. They're a lot of work. I really wish he would like one big tart, but no, you've got to have this perfect little tart ratio, and you can't buy pre-made tarts. It's got to be the pie crust homemade way, but he loves it, and he gets it twice a year unless I'm really feeling generous with my time. Now, the quickest way that I have found to make these is you can definitely like pop them and roll them out and cut circles and put them in there. That takes forever. I just kind of go through and like drop a little ball of dough in each hole. And then I'm going to go through with my thumbs and kind of push them around to shape the little tarts on there with it. You don't want to go too thick with the dough. You also don't want to go too thin. One time I worked really hard and I was like, oh, these are going to be great. And they were like the paper thin shells that you had to very gently fill up because they, fall apart. Mini muffin tins work well. I do have a tart pan. I made them with the tart pan one time, and my husband was like, not the right ratio. They're too wide and not things. So mini muffin pans. And I call them lemon tarts, but they're like a lemon lime tart because, again, that lime adds a little bit more tartness, kind of cuts through the sweetness of them. So we're going to get our first one. And so here's kind of how I do it. So you've got them in here, and I break the whole thing. And then you just are going to push it in and around the edges just like that. And boom, you have a nice little lemon tart. Now, these aren't going to be the perfect looking masterpiece lemon tart where all of the edges end at the same time. This is my way of making lemon tarts much faster. And a lot of times when I make lemon tarts, I make like 80 lemon tarts at a time. So I'll make these set of 3 or 12 twice. And then sometimes if I have even more dough, I make it. But today we'll see how far we're stretching. I'm making lots of things with our pie dough. So I will see how many we'll get through. And what you do is you just bake up these shells like this in a hot oven at 450 for about 5 to 8 minutes. It really depends on how thin you push them out, and also whether you have like thinner muffin tins or thicker ones. But that's pretty much all you do. And then once they cooled, you fill them up with this lemon curd that we'll make in a little bit. Let me give my onions a real quick stir. And now that my pan's nice and warm, I'm going to turn it down to a 4. Because again, this is a metal pan and I don't want it to get too hot. We want to get a nice kind of caramelization on our onions here. But you can see how you can kind of actually whip through these pretty quickly. Now, I think the reason why I always am like, oh, these are so much work is because these disappear. Even when I make 80, they're gone in a day. Maybe they might make it. They never make it to day 3. Day 2, you got half of them eaten here. And if it's just us, now if my father-in-law comes over, they're gone. They're gone in one day. They don't make it far because they're just perfect to pop in your mouth. And they're not heavy. You know, they've got that lemon lime filling. So they're really light and refreshing. And people just pop them and just keep popping them. And so you're just like, you know how much work that took me to press these molds out? But that's what I say. You don't have to be perfect. I mean, again, you're not going on, you know, the next great American baker, whatever one of those shows are. You just push them in here like that. Goes around here. You'll bake them up. You just want to make sure you don't leave any parts like super thick in there. And it will give you just enough of a basin to put your little dollop of lemon curd in there. So we'll break that one through. We'll get these up. Pop them in here. I'm going to just pop these, break them, divide them out. Then we're going to peel up our carrots and our onions and get those going in here. So I'm not going to push these in just quite yet, but I'll have them divided so I can step over here to do it. And my pie dough. So this is one of those things, the pie dough, since I didn't make it on screen, I'm going to talk to you guys about it. It's a really, really simple recipe. Now, when I made this, I quadrupled it because I'm using it for a lot of different things. But the base recipe for my butter pie dough is 2 sticks of butter. I like to use salted butter with 2 1/4 cups of flour and about 9 tablespoons of water. You can go between 8 to 10. You know, you might have to adjust it depending if you're on a higher altitude or not. But 9 seems to be the perfect kind of ground for it. And then a teaspoon of salt. And what you do is you're going to mix the salt into the flour. Then you're going to cut your cold butter into the flour, just like we do when we make biscuits or pastries or scones. You know how I cut the cold butter into it? You cut it into it. Once your butter is cut into it and you have no pieces bigger than a pea or whatnot, you're going to add in your water, and you want to use kind of cold water. And I use a fork to toss it. And then I do my press and folds until the dough is all together. And that gives me just the best, flakiest pie crust dough. I don't put any sugar in my pie crust dough because I like to keep it very mild so that it can be used for both sweet and savory. But if you wanted to use it on a pie and just for a sweet pie or just for lemon tarts, you could put up to, a teaspoon, like to a tablespoon of sugar, depending on how sweet. The sugar in it will give you a slightly more golden brown color to your pie crust. But I find that the butter does it really well in there. And the butter really brings out the flavor. I used to make my pie crust using shortening because that was just the thing back in the day. You use shortening for everything. And then I, switched over to using butter, and it does taste better. So much better. Okay, we're going to chop up our celery here. It was about 3 good-sized stalks. We had probably a little bit more, but they were little bit of babies. I'm going to cut them up, kept the leaves on them because those leaves have a great kind of more fragrant celery flavor to it. A lighter one, but they'll add great flavor to our pot pie base, which I will say, my stepdaddy's recovering from his hip surgery, and this is one of his favorite dishes. So I'm making, one to bring over for him as well. Here. Give it a nice little toss up, let those saute. Give them a minute, and then we're going to add our carrots in. But while we're waiting, let's go push our next one because I want to pop these in the oven because we're starting with our oven at 450 degrees today. And then we're going to bring it down for our almond pastry when we get to that because almond pastry is going to bake at 300. But we're going to want to bake our chicken pot pie and our lemon tart base here at 450. But with pies, just like you would, you start them off high and then you turn them down. That's to give them a nice, good golden kiss at the top, but you don't want them to get too dark. So going right down through here. And again, mini muffin pans is where it's all at. Not a tart pan. You don't need the bougie tart pans. Mini muffins. And if you've got kids, what I always say, where I've inherited all of my mini muffin pans is at Christmas time. They always do like those decorating kits or whatnot for gingerbread houses, and they'll have the candies and whatnot in here. I just collected mine throughout the time. So I have so many of them because I'm like, oh, perfect. And then you have a mini muffin pan to use. Here. So we'll get these. And it's really not, this is the most efficient way to make a whole bunch of tarts. That isn't as laborious as rolling out, cutting little circles and placing them in there. Especially because we're already going to roll out for our chicken pot pies and our almond pastry. Look at this. So much easier. Now, if you do want the bougie, perfect looking tart, you're going to have to roll it out and cut the circle because that circle will give you that perfect little all the way around. But if all you care is that it tastes good, this is where you're at. Okay, 2 down. 1 more to go before we pop those in the oven. But let's get our carrots in here. Let's give this a quick stir. We've got some nice caramelization happening on our onions and our celery. And just smell those flavors. I've got 3 carrots. We're going to give them a good peel. I'm going to peel up 2 and then we'll see because these are pretty fat carrots. But I think we're going to use all 3 because this is just we're not adding any more after the mushrooms. So it's kind of our base of our chicken pot pie. And I do a lot of different bases. Sometimes I'll do a beefy pot pie or I'll do kind of different flavors in there where like a creamier chicken one. This one is just your base. Think about almost like how you would have a chicken noodle soup or whatnot, except we have the mushrooms in it, but in a nice creamy gravy. So it's a more simple one. It's like your good old, what was it that was growing up? The Marie Callender's chicken pot pies. I feel like those were one of those things that were so good when you're a kid. And just remember getting them and thinking, oh, why don't we ever make pot pies? And I started making pot pies, I want to say like a decade or two ago, and love them. I should say a decade because 2 would be a long time ago. Not that old. Here. We're going to dice up our carrots nice and small. That way they'll get nice and tender. They're going to bake in the oven, so the sauteing will help bring out those natural flavors, get them a little bit tender, but the rest of the tenderness will get through in the oven. You don't want to overcook them because you want your vegetables in your chicken pot pie to still have a little bit of firmness to them. You don't want them mushy, but you want them to be soft enough to eat through. So it's kind of getting that perfect balance. It's the same thing when I talk about making apple pies, how I pre-cook the apples a little bit so that I don't have super firm apples when it's done, because you're only baking the pie base for, like 30 minutes max on here, because everything is already kind of pre-cooked. And these are smaller pot pies. A bigger one you do need to cook a little bit longer, but the smaller ones you don't need to cook as long. So we'll get these carrots chopped up and we'll add them in here. And then we're going to get our last little lemon tart dough pressed out. And then we can pop this first kind of batch in the oven to bake off. Give these in here. So again, we have our onions, our carrots, and our celery. And for part of the base of it, our last vegetable we'll add in here is our mushrooms. We'll put some spices in, and then we're going to add in our chicken. And then we'll take everything out, and we're going to make our base for it. Okay, let's. Got 1 and 2 done. But it goes pretty fast, kind of once you've got a good system here. I used to just break off and press down each one, but then I was like, you got to streamline it and just do them all at one time. Here. And a little bit of pie dough goes a long way. You don't need actually as much as you think to put in there to bake it up. And with this pie dough, you don't need it when you're doing it. You do the press and folds so that it has the nice flaky layers in it, which again just makes it nice. Now these are pretty small ones, so you don't get it quite as much as you're going to get those flaky layers in the bigger pot pie that we make, but it will be delicious. So push these down and spread them out. Kind of just move it around just like this.
A question, do you know what you're doing for dinner yet?
For dinner, I have steelhead trout, and so we're going to do something with steelhead trout tonight, especially since we haven't had fish in a while, and my oldest daughter has been asking for salmon, and I find steelhead trout is really similar in flavor to salmon, although it's a little bit cheaper at Costco, so that's also a nice kind of bonus on it. Has a nice kind of orangish pink color that salmon has. But my husband actually prefers steelhead trout over salmon. So he'll be a little bit more happy with fish night tonight. Oh, he got steak like 3 times this week. So he's good. His birthday's over. No more. Except his birthday's not over until he eats his lemon tarts. And then I'm like, done. Check this box off. Although I don't know if anybody else's spouses has this belief in birthday weeks that turn into a birthday month, and I'm soon think he's going to start pressing for like a birthday quarter and then a birthday year, and then it's just going to be every day is his birthday. He's going to be like Frosty the Snowman, where every time you see him he's like, happy birthday.
It is my birthday year.
I guess it's his birthday year under that notion. And he's trying to pass this like thing on. I was like, there is no such thing as a birthday week and a birthday thing. Now maybe that's because I grew up in a really big family, and in our family, you got to be like queen or king for the day, and you got to make all of the rules and make all the decisions, pick where we always went out to eat on our birthday growing up. That's something my stepdad always did for us, was we especially with a large family, going out to eat back in the 90s with 8 people, a lot of people. And he always treated us out every year for our birthday for each one of us kids. And so you got to pick it. And all of my siblings, I would remember, would try to sway me. Do you want to go to this restaurant? Do you want to go to this one? And put it there. But, you got to have all the things. Let's get these in the oven on there.
The chat says 100% birthday week's a thing.
Okay, birthday. Maybe I'll give that. I tried to push for those who've had kids for push presents. I was told that was not a thing. I feel like push presents. I feel like I have 5 push presents waiting for me. If birthday weeks are a thing, push presents are a thing for having babies. Okay, let's get ours in. You're going to want to put them on the top shelf, which is why I like to kind of do 3 here. Set them right there. Now, these cook up really fast. You don't want to overcook them. They're at 450. So I'm going to set my timer here for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come and check on them. Again, depending on how thick I push them or how thin is when you go, but you want to take them out when they're starting to get just lightly kissed and brown around the edges. And then you'll take them out. You'll leave them in the pie tin to cool off, which will help them firm up a little bit more. And again, give you all that delicious butter crust flavor to it. Okay, we've got our carrots, onions, celery in here. We're going to add in our mushrooms. I never buy pre-sliced mushrooms, but I have a package of pre-sliced mushrooms for some reason. So I bet you it was left over from Thanksgiving. So we're going to add those in here. Less work, easier for me. Put them in there. Now, there's nothing wrong with pre-sliced mushrooms. They just don't last as long as sliced mushrooms. Oh, you know what? I remember. I was at Target and they only had pre-sliced. That's where I got them from. I know, random thought. Off on a tangent.
You just said sliced mushrooms don't last as long.
No, I meant
mushrooms.
Yeah, okay. Pre-sliced mushrooms don't last as long as full mushrooms because you cut them, they get slimier faster. It's my brain. It's all organized up here. I know it doesn't translate out. That is the mystery of me. I always feel like, so my best friend who we worked together for years, and English wasn't her first language, she was from Uruguay, and I always swear she must have had to decode whatever I say because I frequently speak in like half sentences or just miss full-on verbs and nouns that are key to things or thoughts that I thought I said out loud, but I did not. It's a common thing that I do. So I wonder, and I mean, she loved me for all of my crazy, ness, but I wonder if I was really difficult to understand at times, but she was really good. She was like the best coworker ever. We're still like best friends on there, but she's one of the greats. When you find somebody who matches your like work speed and everything like that, you can get those a lot, but she was fun and matched my crazy. Okay, we've got our twigs of our rosemary from there was about a teaspoon. We have some thyme, which is going to be about a teaspoon, and some sage. I'm using up some of my spices that I have. So this is going to give it, and the green onions. We had some stalks. I used some of these spices last night, and so I was like, oh, we'll use them up in here. We're going to add in some other dry spices, but we're going to throw the fresh ones in there. Makes it a little bit more bougie. We'll get these minced up in there, get them toasting up with there. We'll throw in our meat in a little bit, and then let that all heat up. And then we're going to take all the veggies out and make a nice roux to kind of toss everything in. And I always say with chicken pot pie, you're going to want to make more sauce or roux base for your gravy than you think you're going to need, because it takes a lot more to cover up everything than you think. And you don't want it to be too dry, because you want it to be nice and just flavorful and delicious inside. So I've got all of our little fresh herbs here minced up. Give it a couple more. Kind of toss overs. So add just again a nice pop of freshness to everything. It was again about a teaspoon of rosemary, teaspoon of thyme, a teaspoon of sage, and 3 bottom parts of green onions that we had left over. Give this a nice little toss in, kind of coat them up. We'll get them fresh herbs to get a little bit of heat. here. And let's get a little bit of black pepper in here. We're going to do about, I'm going to do close to a teaspoon because I do want all that flavor to kind of come through. We're going to do a little bit of onion powder. This is just going to make that thicker sauce have a little bit more flavor. I'm going to put in about a half a tablespoon, so a good amount. We're going to do a little bit of garlic salt. We'll do about a teaspoon because, again, in our sauce, we're going to have a little bit of chicken bouillon, which will add some flavor to it, so we don't need too much. Kind of coat these veggies up. Let them saute. I'm going to throw in our shredded chicken so it can kind of heat up for a little bit as well. But let's go and take a quick peek at our lemon tarts and see our tart shells, because there's no lemon in them yet. So our tart shells. See if I need to put out a couple of trivets. Don't know why. Okay. Let me look. You know what? I think I want them in for about 2 more minutes. But before we do that, we want to rotate them around so that the back end doesn't get too hot. I see a little bit of crisping up on there. Here we go. But this way they'll cook a little bit evenly. Okay. And so timer, I'm going to do 2 more minutes and then it should be perfect to take them out. I always say, I'm always undershoot your time, because if you overcook them, then you've ruined all your hard work. And with lemon tarts, I tell you, it's hard work. Okay. Let's get our shredded chicken in here. So again, we have our Costco shredded rotisserie chicken, which again, I think is the best stuff ever because it takes a little bit of the work out. So we used some the other day to, we made yellow chicken. That is one of my mom's dishes that she taught growing up, and it's just so good. I'm gonna just go and kind of cut it over it. This is just gonna break up any of those bigger pieces because you don't want super huge chunks in your chicken pot pie or it'll be hard to eat. And then we're going to toss this all in here, let it heat up. We'll pull it out. We're going to make our roux and then throw everything right back in this pan. But you do want to have a minute of it kind of getting nice and tasty. Get those kind of fresh herbs on it and heat it up. Again, it's pre-cooked, so you're just really warming it so that when we're ready to add that roux in, that make our gravy. I always say the roux is the base for the gravy that's going on it. Here, overboard. But you see, we've got a good amount, and I would say that was, about a 1.5, maybe a little less than 1.5 pounds of shredded chicken, because it was about half that pack of chicken that we had. Okay, we're gonna let that heat up for just a second. Let me go give my hands a quick rinse, and then we can grab our shells out. We'll let them sit and cool, and we'll take our things out. We'll start making, we've got to make our curd, our base for lots of things. Got it. Perfect. Now you can see we've got just this nice kiss of brown around the edges on here. So you can just see a lovely light brown kiss, and that's what you want. You don't want them too dark because they're going to continue to cook in our little pans for just a little bit longer. I'm keeping my oven at 400 because we'll let these sit here, but we're going to put our chicken pot pies in there. We'll start them at 400, then we'll turn them down to do the final baking part, which is really bringing up all those flavors inside. Okay. Let's get a bowl here. That way I can transfer this stuff out and we can make that roux on here. And I've done it before where, you know, you sprinkle flour over the top of it and you pour your broth in to kind of thicken it up like you're making a stew. I find the gravy kind of holds better in the baking process if you make a gravy first versus just doing like the flour in the stock. You need that butter in there to just hold it together and keep it a nice texture without it going too runny. Dropping everything. Let's see if we can actually, might be a little bit more efficient. So we're going to just scoop it all in here. Don't worry if you have a little bit of some tasty bits in here. That is a-okay. You just want to get enough where you have a nice kind of clean base on it. I'll set this up here. And since I'm kind of done with this for right now, let's move it right here. And we're going to melt some butter in here to make our base for our roux. So I'm going to turn my pan on pretty low at around a 2. This is room temperature butter, so it should melt fairly fast. I'm going to do about maybe 2.5 to 3 tablespoons of butter. And you kind of do equal parts butter and flour to make the base for our roux. We're going to let it melt. Once it's completely melted, then we're going to add in our flour. While we're doing that, let me grab another one of our pie dough discs and we can roll out on here. Now my trick for rolling out pie dough is put it between 2 sheets of parchment paper. That way you have kind of a non-stick surface on both sides of the pie crust and you don't worry. I've used the pie, like the pastry blanket things that you lay out, or mats, not a blanket, but a mat. They just don't work as well. Let me slide this over a little smidge. Give me a little bit more room. And you're going to want I find a good sturdy rolling pin works well with this. So I'm going to start, I don't need all of this for my first pie crust because I'm not doing them in like pie tins. I'm doing them on, these are like deep dish pizza tins or little mini cake pans. I kind of use them for a lot of different things. Start by pressing down your dough. Makes it a little bit easier to roll it out when you already have it going. And then I've got a marble rolling pin, which allows me to, again, roll it out nice and firmly and smooth. Now this dough was chilling in my fridge, so it is cold, which means it's firmer, but you need cold dough to give you those flaky layers. You don't want it room temperature or you're gonna have stiff pie crusts instead of beautiful flaky layers. I also find I don't roll my pie crust out super thin because I don't want it to be so thin that it can't hold the chicken pot pie base in it, but you also don't want it too thick to where you can't, like it doesn't firm up and get nice and like crunchy, not crunchy, but crispy, you know, flaky. There we go. Gotta find the right adjective. So this should be just nice. Now, the nice thing about doing, and you can see I always find this nice like white see-through parchment paper is easier than using like the brown ones because you can see it. But just nice and flat. Make it bigger than, of course, your pie crust. Also, know that you're going to have a lip on here because they are a little bit thicker. So I'm going to just roll it one more time this way, and then we'll lift up the thing. Just take it off the top. Leave your bottom one on because that's how you're going to allow it to kind of roll in there. Before we throw that on our pie tin, let's get our butter is melted here for our roux. So I'm going to grab a whisk. And we used, again, about between 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter. So we're going to want about 2 to 3 tablespoons of flour to make our roux, which is going to be like a creamy paste on here for it. Add maybe a smidge more. Whisk that in. We're going to let it just heat over this low heat for just about a minute or two to really bring out a little bit of its flavor, but it doesn't need to be on here so long. We're not going to turn it brown like you would with a gumbo or whatnot. But we're just going to let it heat for just a second. And while we do that, let me grab my spray this. This is just going to help the pie come out of your tin a little bit easier. And then you just lay it over the top. Just try to make sure you have it kind of evenly. Again, when it's not super thin, you don't have to worry about it breaking as much. And then what we're going to do is you're just going to help nudge it down. Now, this is going to be more of a deep dish one, because a little one, because it is a thing, but it works well for this.
Mary sent you good.
Well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that. So you're going to bring it down and push it down in here and just fold it over. We're not going to cut our edges off yet. We'll do that later on there because we want to put our top on it. But here you've got a beautiful base for this. So wonderful. Okay, this is looking perfect. Now, you can use chicken broth. If you made chicken stock at home, beautiful, wonderful. I'm going to use some chicken bouillon with my water to do the base. We're just going to do a simple kind of, I want to say like a velouté base to this versus like a bechamel, which would use milk in it. I'm not going to add any cream or anything. I'm going to add my chicken stock in first. That way I can judge like how much liquid I'm going to use. So we're going to do about a heaping tablespoon. I'm just going to scoop out the rest of what's in here because there's hardly any in there, but don't want it to go to waste. Now this is going to be the saltiness factor to our sauce because it's going to have that bouillon flavor to it. You could pre-mix it into your water if you want to on there, but because I don't know if I'm going to use all of this for it, I'm just going to mix it in like this. There we go. And now we're going to add in a little bit and mix it up. And you're just little by little, don't flood it, let it hydrate, and then you'll mix it. It's going to start thickening up into a really thick paste, and then you'll add, and it'll soon be a nice creamy gravy, which then we'll toss all of our vegetables in. Then we'll roll out a little bit more of our pie tart on here, and I'm going to do just a quick lattice on my chicken pot pie for this one because it's always so pretty. And it's actually not as hard as you think. And then we'll make while this is baking in the oven, we're going to make our tart filling. We'll blend together our almond pastry base, which takes like 2 seconds. It's one of those things where all the hard work is in making the pie crust, but you can make so many great, delicious things with it. So again, little by little. And a whisk is really what you need. It's kind of hard to do it with just a spoon because it allows you to kind of break up those clumps in here. But do you see how we've got this really thick gravy right now? And you don't want your gravy too thin, but just know that you add your water and it'll be thin, but as you expose it to the heat, it thickens up again. Here. And I've turned my temperature up now to about a 5 now that I've added more and more liquid in here so that it can really heat and thicken up so I can know exactly where I want to stop it at. Yeah. But this is like just a perfect little, base for any gravy or whatnot. Okay. We're going to just let that heat up and thicken for a second. And while we do that, I'm gonna grab a little bit of a pie dough here. We're gonna roll it out so that we'll be ready to do our top on it. And then we'll pop these in the oven to bake. And then we'll whip up our lemon tart base, which is pretty quick and easy. Our almond pastry base is just quick and easy. So a lot of quick things. Now, for this pie crust, you don't need a lot. And anything that we cut off from this, oh, I realized I had more pie crust over here already. Didn't even need to go in that one yet. But this one, you just need it to be the circle on it, and then we're going to slice it up, which will allow us to cut it in strips and do the lattice kind of on there. And you can do any form of pie crust. Sometimes I just do the double pie crust. Sometimes I do the lattice. Sometimes I'll get bougie and get out little, cookie cutters and cut out. I've done little teddy bears and leaves on there, depending on. I did hearts one time for it to cut out. If you do the full second pastry topper on your pie, you do need to make sure you cut a little hole or two for steam to escape, or your pie will pop up and then it can crack. So you don't want to do that. Here. Okay. And then we're going to add a little bit more broth to our thing, but this should be just about perfect. So here, look how much it's already thickened up with that heat on there. So we're going to add again a little bit more. And then I'm going to taste it, see if we're where we want to be in our flavor department, knowing that you want it to be a little bit flavorful than if you were to eat it straight up, because this is going to be coating a lot of our vegetables. Perfect. I think it's the perfect amount of thickness here. So as you see, when I stir it a little bit here, you can kind of make it as if it's like cutting through like a thicker, but it's not so thick like pudding or whatnot. So I used about 2.5 cups of water in here. I'll slide this right over here. And then we're going to just take our vegetables that we sauteed up and our chicken, and we're going to put it right back into this sauce. Coat it up, give it all that flavor. Remember all those herbs that we cooked that chicken in, that sage, rosemary, thyme, green onion are all in there. A little black pepper, so it has some nice flavor. Oop, made a big mess. I thought about moving it to the bigger sheet pan, but good thing I always make extra gravy. Didn't lose too much. Here we go. Slide that. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And carefully stir around the edges so that you don't make a big mess. There we go. So you just coat everything up, but you see how there's enough of that sauce to coat everything, but it's not swimming in it. You don't want it super soupy, but you want everything to be coated in there so that it's not dry inside your chicken pot pie. Beautiful. Okay, heat's off.
I have a question. Did you use a whole chicken?
This was the Costco's shredded rotisserie chicken that you can buy already shredded. So I believe they shred a whole chicken when they're doing it, or the easy parts to shred. But you can use any type. You can shred it up and use it. You don't have to worry about like dark meat or light meat, keeping it to one side. Okay, let's see. I want to just make sure it's lined up perfectly. Yep. So what we're gonna do, because we'll trim everything off, is you're just going to make your slices down here. And this is going to be for our lattice work. So just use a knife to kind of cut it down. I don't go super thin with my lattice work. I like to keep them a little bit thicker because I just think it gives a little bit more body when you're working with.
Marianne sent you.
Well, thank you, Marianne. We appreciate that a lot. Okay, we're going to take our chicken pot pie filling in here. We're going to scoop it in. We'll fill it up. Make sure do one more scoop in here. Perfect. You don't want to go so far over that it, is going out the edges, but just enough to cover the top. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our little lattice strips. So I start kind of with going with one, go every other one. As I say that, I didn't go every other one. So you go every other one when you're filling this across right here. And let's see, I'll do a small one on this side. And then we're going to go through here with our other ones. And then you kind of go in, over one, down, kind of over. So just like that, you kind of do a basket weave and you reverse it. So it's going to be up, down, over like that. So just every other one is opposite. And that's going to give it a little bit more security when you do it. And also gives you that nicer look at the end.
You have a question? Could you par bake the bottom crust?
You can definitely par bake it. I have found that it is not a necessity to do because this cooks in long enough to do it in there. But you can definitely do it, and then your pie would be done a lot faster. Let's get this in, over, in, and then this little guy right there. So now we've kind of got our whole little pie crust here all baked up. And now it might not look like the most beautiful thing yet. But we're going to get our scissors out and we're going to get a fork. And then before I cut off the edges, I like to go around with my fork and I just kind of crimp the edges all together to give you that kind of more pretty look to it. And then we'll take our scissors and we will cut off the extra pie dough that goes all the way around. And again, super simple, pretty easy, cute little baby pot pie. And then just take your scissors and just cut right along the edge of your pie pan. It will just use that as a guide, and that is going to give you a nice kind of simple circle.
It's like 5 more lemon tarts.
Yes, it probably, he's counting to make sure that none of his dough gets left out. But you save it because you can use it for the lattice work on the next one. If you want a shiny topping to your pie crust, you can coat this with a little bit of egg wash. I just leave it simple like this. We're going to pop this in the oven so that this one can get done in time while we work on everything else, and we'll work on the other things. But that way you guys can see a finished product. Because everything is pre-cooked in here, you only need to cook it for about 25 to 30 minutes. We will do, slide it in here carefully, 5 minutes or so at 450, and then we're going to turn it down to 350. So I'm going to set my timer here for about 5 minutes. It gets it a nice good kind of cook on it, but then you turn it down so that you don't overcook the top of your crust. So you always just want to do a little higher in the beginning, but you can always just do, if you have the time, you can do an even keel 450 or 350, and you can bake it at 350 for an hour, or you can do 400 for about 35 to 40 minutes. I typically do the faster one, but either one really works. If you do the 350 at a longer, you'll get even more tender of the kind of the veggies and whatnot. But we're going to get that going here. Let's whip up our tarts because that is our next thing on it. And we have it. Okay. So we've got our baked of our tarts here. We're going to make the base for it. It's really simple. Now, the other day I made a lemon lime cake, and we are going to make a lemon lime curd here, but we're going to use yolks in it. So for the cake, I did a yolkless one so that it was not quite as rich, a little bit creamier, kind of blended into the cake a little bit better. For this, we're going to use the yolks in it, but we're going to start with 1.5 cups of sugar. and then 1.5 cups of water. So you kind of need equal parts sugar and water. And then we're going to put in 7 tablespoons of cornstarch as our thickener. So let me see, since we didn't use up all of that water. And there happens to be exactly 1.5 cups in here. Look at that. It's like it new. So we're going to put 1.5 cups of water in here. And then we have 7 tablespoons of cornstarch. One, 2, 3, 4. Getting down to the very end. 5, 6. And you know what? That is going to give us 7 tablespoons of cornstarch. Perfect. Apparently there was 7 exactly in there. I'm going to turn on my back burner. We're going to whisk that together. Actually, yeah, we'll use a whisk. Kind of get it to start to dissolve. It's going to be a slurry right now, but as we add that heat over like a medium heat here, it's going to thicken up. Once it's completely congealed and thickened, we'll remove it from the heat. We will add in our 3 egg yolks, our lemon juice, lemon lime juice, and a little bit of butter and some lemon zest. So let's work on that. Let's get our juiced up lemons and limes here. Gotta use fresh. It just makes it taste better. Let me get a little bowl here so I can get the juicing going and the zesting. So I'm going to zest first and get in here. And then we're just going to do it all in one thing because you'll add it all right in there. I like to zest 1 lemon and 1 lime because I like the little specks of green in there from the lime. And then we'll see. It really is going to depend on how much juice you get from your lemons and lime to what it gets there. But I like to do like 2 lemons to every 1 lime, or I can, depending on it. I don't go too heavy on the lime, just a little bit, and it just really brings out a really nice tartness that you just don't get from just the straight up lemons, because lemons are a lot sweeter than limes. So we call them lemon tarts, but they really are a lemon lime. Now, you can always use like a key lime. If you don't want to do it, I will say a good substitute. Don't use like the true lemon, true lime, but the key lime, I want to say it's like, I feel like there's only one maker of the key lime juice, and it's in that like yellow container. It's been around forever, but that one is a pretty good substitute. But again, fresh is best. Let's get our zester up here. And then we'll squeeze them in here. And we need about 1/2 cup because that's where all the tang for these tarts are going to come from, is this lemon zest and this freshly squeezed juice. And because you don't cook it after you add it in there, you're going to want it. Okay, I'm going to go. I hear my timer's going off. So we're going to just turn the oven down to 350. So we baked it at 450 at that thing to get a nice kind of golden, like a nice peaker color on it. If you have a bigger pie, you want to do less, but we can take a quick peek at it. But it just helps it kind of bubble up and get a little bit crisper on the beginning. It just helps that crisp up that bottom too. So we are going to, let me cancel it, bring it down to 350. There we go. And now this oven is still hot when you have it in there, so it's going to gradually bring it down. And I'm going to put 20 minutes on here for that to be done kind of with the cooking of it, because it is a smaller one. Bigger pot pies need a little bit longer to cook. Okay, let's get our lime finished zesting here. So you want ideally around, a tablespoon. So we've got a good amount of zest in here on there, because that gives you just a bit more flavor than just the juice. Let me grab my little juicer right over here. And let's grab a little knife. I'm thinking 3 lemons and 2 limes might get me to a half a cup, but it could be a little less. You never know. Especially with limes. Sometimes your limes are so juicy, sometimes they leave a bit to be desired. And then I'll have to fish out my seeds because apparently this one hit the seed jackpot. There's like 8 seeds in there. I'm going to give a little whisk of my cornstarch, sugar, and water. Again, we have 1.5 cups of sugar, 1.5 cups of water, and 7 tablespoons of cornstarch in there. In the beginning, you don't have to stir it quite as frequently, but once it starts to thicken up and congeal on the bottom, then you want to be kind of stirring it constantly. That's just so it doesn't scald. Let's get another one of these guys in here. You know, it's funny, like sometimes I get lemons that are just have no seeds in it, and sometimes they are just, I think I once pulled like 40 seeds out of a lemon once. Could have grown my own orchard from it. These are pretty juicy lemons, so that's nice. We are at almost a half a cup, so let's start with just 2 lemons. We're going to get our limes in here.
A question: have you ever bought the seedless lemons?
I've never actually seen where you could buy seedless. When we go to our grocery store, you just have lemons and limes or bags of lemons and limes, but we don't have all that variety. I would love, because there's sometimes where it doesn't matter, you know what I mean, if you're gonna strain it or anything, but there's times where you're like, ugh, I gotta fish these out.
Chat says Aldi has them.
Oh, I do shop at Aldi, so I probably just don't pay attention. Or, the other day, I thought this was hilarious. So I had, I'm going to wash my hands real quick. I had Evie with me, and I told her, I was like, oh, can you grab me some limes? And she was like, even though she eats limes all the time, she wasn't sure. She was like, what? She couldn't remember which one was a lemon and which one was a lime. And I was like, the green ones are limes and the yellow ones are lemons. And she was like, oh, I just couldn't remember. And I'm like, you eat one. Like every single time I have it out, she eats them. See, it's so tricky because lemons are sweeter, which I like the sweetness, but I like the more refreshing flavor of a lime. But it's still a little bit tangier. Okay. I want to keep the zest in there. And I like to keep the zest in there. It kind of rehydrates it. So I'm just going to have to pick out. Look at this. I'm already got, I've got my future here as a lemon lime orchard grower. There we go. It was funny. So my grandparents, retired to Spain. And my grandfather, he was like a genius. So he was a nuclear physicist, but truly like one of those Renaissance man's geniuses. And he was all into all sorts of also agriculture, ancient agriculture. And he grafted a tree there. So he grew lemons, limes, and oranges all on one tree by grafting different branches on it so that he could have just one tree in his yard, but it could produce all the different fruits that he liked. And I always just thought it was so cool. And I was like, oh, I need to do that one day. But I've got to improve my gardening skills in order to do that. As in, I have to learn to water the plants because apparently that is essential to their growth. Okay, we get this. It's mixing here. We're starting. It still hasn't quite got there. Once it goes from being nice and things, it's going to be perfect in there. Okay, we're going to get our yolks here for our lovely our lemon. I'm trying to think of the word.
Lemon curd.
Lemon curd. There we go. I had my mind thought on almond pastry there, but for our lemon curd here, we don't need the whites, just the yolks, and that's gonna give the lemon curd its yellow color. So we're gonna separate them out. If you're super bougie, you can save your whites to make a meringue or something like that, but I'm just going to use just the yolk. So I don't, now I realize why lemon is always like lemon meringue pie is a thing, because you use your yolks for the curd base of it and you've got your whites left over. So what did they do? Topped it with meringue. And now that makes so much more sense than thinking, well, how would you put that on top of your lemon pie? Okay, you need to beat up your yolks. Doesn't take much, but you want to have them pre-beaten up in here so that they kind of mix in nicely. We've got our juice, and we're getting there. It's starting to thicken up. I'm going to add in a pinch of salt and there. I think what we're going to do is we're going to save our almond pastry for tonight's dinner, because otherwise I'll be keeping you guys here forever. You want just a pinch of salt in here. It just cuts through that sweetness and the tartness of it on there. So we'll have this, and we'll get these lemon tarts made and filled up, and then we'll have our chicken pot pie out. We'll let that sit for just another second here. While we're waiting for that to kind of thicken up here, let's roll out our next kind of layer of our chicken pot pies, since I've got one in the oven going. That way we can start feeding people. Now, these are small, but they are big. So you can definitely keep them if you ate them as just a meal on their own. One could definitely serve you. Sometimes I make a huge chicken pot pie and you can cut it up. But I will say, it's fun to have your own little personal pot pie. The only caveat there is there's a lot more work to make individual ones than one big one. And you need a lot more pie crust. So you can definitely make one big one. These also are pretty good size, where these little ones on here you could share between two people as well, with like a salad to kind of cut down. Or if you're going to have, quite the amount of lemon tarts to eat for dessert, you've got that to share it up. I will also, a lot of times when I do chicken pot pies, now since I'm making lemon tarts, I'm not doing it, but I will make little baby apple pies too in these containers, because I have 8 of these little deep dish containers. And so then you make them and you make the little apple pies. So you've got pot pie, apple pie, pie time. Okay, let's roll this guy out again. You don't want it super thin, because you want it to be sturdy enough to hold the base without breaking through and causing it to kind of ooze through. But you don't want it so thick that you have a chewy crust instead of a flaky crust. Okay, I think we've got this more than big. Yep, I do. So here we've got our base for it. Let's check this guy out. Oh, we're perfect here. So we can actually take a pause. I'm going to turn my heat off since we're nice and thick, but look how thick this gets. Beautiful. So this is when you know that it's nice and thick. You see how it's kind of formed a glob. You want it like this. It's going to thin out. You're going to remove it from the heat. And then get this one more in here. There's a little egg white that I want to fish out here, because that egg white right here, if you leave it in there, it's going to turn white in your, and you'll have these white specks in your curd. You're going to add in your yolk first. And the heat of this is going to cook that yolk, because you got to remember it's nice and hot, and it's going to be mixed between this nice and thin. So here, and that's why you put it in first before you put the juice, but you see how it's already got this nice kind of lovely yellow color to it from the curd, and it thickens it up. Now, you're going to add in your 1/2 cup of your lemon lime juice with that lemon lime zest in here. We've got 1 seed. I'm going to catch it before it goes in there. Perfect. We're going to mix this in here. It's going to thin it out just a little bit, but it's going to thicken right back up. Now I'm going to actually switch to a spoon, because it will make it a little bit easier to mix it. But when you're doing the base part, it works well with the whisk because it makes it nice and thing. And then the only thing that you add left to your curd here is we are going to add in 2 tablespoons of butter. But first, make sure that your lemon and lime juice is mixed in. And again, that's a half a cup.
Anne just sent you
Oh, well, thank you, Anne. We appreciate that. Here we go. So you got it mixed up. Do you see how it's just beautiful? You can see those specks of the yellow and the green from the zest in our curd. So just little perfect little pecks. And now, where did I put my butter? Right here. So we want 2 tablespoons of butter. I find room temperature butter works better than cold because it will melt faster. This is going to give your lemon tart a nice sheen to it. And it also gives it a little bit of a richness to it. But it should melt right in, and you mix it in. And voila, you have the base to your lemon tarts. And then we'll grab our shells, which have cooled off. You've got to make sure your shells are cooled off before you fill them, or it will melt them. And then we'll grab our chicken pot pie out of the oven because it should be done in a little bit. By the time we have everything kind of filled off, that should be ready to go in. Okay, we're going to let that sit and cool for just about a second so that I can fill it up, and then we'll get those. But let's finish up this pot pie since we can get this one in the oven. Again, we're going to take our little deep dish pan here, just spray it down. That way it comes out nice and easy. Although when I serve it, I literally serve it to my family in the tin. You're going to flip it over, kind of make sure it's in the middle. Peel back your crust like this. And then again, you have it thick enough so it shouldn't break, and you should be able to push it down and fold it around right in here, those edges. And then we'll fold it over. And again, you want enough lappage over so that we can seal that top on there perfectly. And then for this top one, I'm going to show you, instead of a lattice crust, I'll show you how to do just a basic circle crust on top, which is the easiest form of crust on there. And if you really like the pie crust pastry, do the circle, like just the plain double pie crust, because it gives you more pie crust per chicken pot pie ratio. Now, you guys won't see this one baking in the oven because the other one will be done before it, but we'll make it short so everybody can see it later. Again, roll it out. You don't want to leave your top too thick because you don't want to have just big kind of chunks on there, but don't make it paper thin either because you want it to be substantial on the top. You want it to puff up and be delicious. And I find doing it between 2 pieces of parchment paper like this is going to give you a really even rollout that doesn't stick to your rolling pin. And it's really easy to transfer. So that should be big enough to do it. Let's fill it up. We've got our pot pie base going in here. Again, we have onions, carrots, celery, mushrooms, rotisserie chicken, and then we made a lovely kind of velouté sauce. We started with a roux. We seasoned it with chicken stock. We added fresh thyme, rosemary, green onions, and sage as our spices, and of course a little bit of black pepper. Place this over the top like that. Now with this one, you're just going to kind of give it a little pinch around. And then I cut with the lattice pie. I don't cut it off first. I pinch it down. With this one, I'm going to cut it off first because it's hard to see where your pie container ends and where it starts. So it's just a little bit easier to go like this. And then we'll go around with our fork. And then, of course, we will cut our little slits in the middle. If you want to get even bougier with this, before you had transferred it on, you could use a cookie cutter and cut out little hearts or a leaf shape in there, whatever little design, a Christmas tree, to take out that middle part. Here's my fork. go around on your side. This is going to seal these two crusts together, give you that pretty crimped pie crust on there. You can always do your finger pinch as well, but I find that this works beautifully. Gives you just simple elegance. So we have it, and then this is important because if you don't cut your little hole there, what will happen is your pie crust will puff up with the steamed air, and then it will crack. We'll pop this in. We'll grab our shells. We can take a look at our chicken pot pie that is cooking because that is almost done. We can see how that looks. Look at that beautiful. You can actually see how thick that crust is, and that's from the press and folds. So I'm going to add, I think, one more minute on what I have left. Let's grab these since these should be cool to touch now, which is important for when we fill them up because you want to be able to take them out of here just beautifully. I'm going to slide this over here. And my trick is when I fill them up, because I make this, we're going to put them on a baking sheet because typically I fill up this entire baking sheet with lemon tarts on here. And it's easier to fill them once you transfer them. But you see, you've got this just beautiful kind of golden brown edge all the way around. And they've cooled off enough that they're nice and firm to touch. And they're just, again, little teeny tiny nuggets. They're not beautifully shaped, but their point is just to hold a dollop of this lemon curd in them. So you get like this perfect bite of pie crust to lemon curd ratio. So this will give us 36 right now. And typically I make another batch of everything. So it's always around 72 is how many I make. Okay. Now, when I fill them up, I just use a spoon and I dollop them in there. If you want to make them bougier, you can definitely put the, get them in put your curd in a piping bag and pipe it in there. But why do the extra work when a dollop of lemon curd is. And again, if you want a prettier looking one versus getting them out quickly and fast just for the taste, you can always roll out your pie crusts and cut them into circles and place them in your tins, but this is easier. Okay, so here is our curd, and you're just going to take your spoon and you're going to fill up each one with your curd, and as it cools, it will form into a lovely kind of thicker gel on there. It will hold its shape. It's not runny at all, but it has this just wonderful tartness to it. And it's just the perfect amount of like curd to kind of the crust base to it. And you see, once you put this like dollop in there, you don't even see how like not pretty the base of your lemon tarts are, because all you see is that perfect little dollop of lemon curd on the top. Here we go. And these, if you we'll make them, what you do to store them is we store them in the fridge, but you store them uncovered. You just can put like a little piece of saran wrap over it, but you need to have air ventilation in them, because if you cover them up, the moisture will make them soggy. But as long as they're just uncovered, and they're so much better right out of the refrigerator cold. Like you can eat them room temperature, but that nice refreshing lemon coldness to it is perfect. I always joke with my husband that I was going to change up the curd and do different flavors, like a cranberry curd. And he was like, why would you ruin lemon tarts that way? And I was like, but they could be so pretty and festive, like a cranberry orange curd. I think that would be delicious. Here we go. And then you see how this is why I actually, you know what? I always say that this is a lot of work, But I actually think making a cake is more work than this. This is actually not that bad. We get in there, nice little dollop. And then we'll go grab our chicken pot pie out of the oven and we can serve up our lunch. I'll have to put a little candle in here. Oh, you know what? Should have had a couple more in here. He could have his birthday here, right where we're at. Okay. Voila. And see, we've got enough in here to do it and perfect timing. It's beeping for me. Look at that. So let's go grab our chicken pot pie out of the oven on here. And look at it. We've got that nice golden brown crust. And when we're over there, we'll zoom in and you can really see those nice flaky layers, which is developed from the press and fold. So it's nice and hot. Let's get everything ready to serve up our dinner there. But if you just look, or lunch here, let me slide this over. And then tonight you'll have to join us back for almond pastry. Okay, let's grab a plate. So when I serve it, I keep it in the individual pie tins. But if I make the big chicken pot pie, then you can, of course, you take your little servings out. But here is our homemade chicken pot pie filled with rotisserie chicken, mushrooms, onions, celery, and carrots. We seasoned it with rosemary, thyme, and green onions and garlic. Here's a picture of the base of our chicken pot pie. And we made a homemade butter crust using, butter, flour, salt, and water. And then also using our butter crust, we have our delicious, cute little lemon tarts, which is the perfect tangy dessert to kind of pair with a rich chicken pot pie with our homemade lemon curd using fresh lemon and lime juice. So it is a lemon lime, but absolutely delicious. And I hope my husband is very happy with his lemon tarts. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to that link and search for what we made. We got our lemon tarts and our chicken pot pie. And tonight we will finish off with our almond pastry, which is my kids' favorite as well, since we have our extra pie crust. And you can always watch Cook Along with us there. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my All-Clad, my Hex-Clad, all of my bakeware, everything I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.